So you found the perfect clip to use in your podcast. Maybe it's a snippet from a movie or a famous song or even a viral TikTok sound. But can you really use it in your show? Are you setting yourself up for a copyright takedown or a cease and desist letter or worse, a lawsuit? Well, that's what we're talking about today, fair use and how it applies in the podcasting world. So let's dive right on in. Hey there, my friend. Welcome back to Legit Podcast Pro, where we talk about the legal and the business side of podcasting so you can focus on creating amazing content without the legal headaches. I'm Gordon Firemark, the podcast lawyer, and today we are tackling one of the most misunderstood topics in content creation, fair use. What it is, what it isn't, and how you can make sure you're staying on the right side of the law when you use copyrighted material in your podcast. And stick around, I want to tell you a little bit about a free video that I've made for you that takes all of this stuff even deeper. It's about leveling up your work. And you can grab it at gordonfiremark.com/levelup. So in order to talk about fair use, we first have to start with the basics. And to do that, we have to start with copyright law. This is the law that's designed to incentivize creators to make original work in the first place. Stories, articles, music, films, paintings, podcast episodes, sculptures, you name it. It's covered by copyright law. If it's an original work, then the creator, that is the author, owns a set of exclusive rights to do stuff with that work. That means that without permission, nobody else is allowed to copy or distribute or display or perform or make derivatives from that original work. But fair use is a legal doctrine that allows limited use of copyrighted material without permission from the copyright owner. It's a doctrine that's designed to preserve some limited free speech, free press kinds of rights in certain specific situations. But here's the thing, it is not a right. It's a defense to a claim of copyright infringement. And that means you might think something qualifies as fair use, but that doesn't stop someone from sending you a cease and desist demand or issuing a takedown notice or even filing a lawsuit against you. The only way to really know if something is fair use is after a judge or a jury decides for you. But don't worry, I'm here to give you some information that I hope will help you make smart, informed decisions about using content in your podcast. There are 4 key factors that courts use in deciding if something qualifies as a fair use. So let's just break those down for you a little bit. The first factor, number 1, is the purpose and character of the use itself. Is it transformative or not? If you're simply copying something, that is not likely to be fair use. But if you are adding new meaning or commentary or criticism, well, then you're more likely to fit into this defense. Educational and nonprofit uses tend to weigh in favor of fair use, while more commercial, purely entertainment kinds of uses don't automatically but that doesn't automatically disqualify you. So, for example, a news podcast analyzing a snippet from a political speech, well, that's a pretty decent case for fair use. A podcast playing an entire song or a joke or what have you, just for the entertainment value, that's pretty risky. On factor number 2, it's the nature of the copyrighted work that we look at. Facts and public information are more likely to be fair use, whereas highly creative works like songs and films and novels are less likely to wind up with a determination of fair use. So, for example, if you're quoting a historical speech, probably or more likely to be considered fair use, although be careful because the speechwriter does own a copyright in their work. And if you're doing something that's more entertainment value stuff, well, just playing a movie clip because it's cool or something like that, well, that's going to be trouble for you. Now, factor number 3 is the amount and substantiality of the portion used relative to the work as a whole. Using a small portion of a work is always going to be better, but it's not always an excuse. And that's because the amount and substantiality factor really could be a qualitative or quantitative thing. So if you use the heart of the work, even if it's a very short little tidbit, that could in fact be too much and determined not to be fair use. So here's an example, reading 1 or 2 little sentences from a book as you give a review. Well, that's pretty safe. Playing the most famous line from a movie, maybe not. And factor number 4 is the effect on the market for or value of the original work. If your use could replace the original work or harm its sales, fair use is unlikely. If your use adds something new and doesn't compete, well, that's stronger. Are you reviewing a song? Maybe it's fair use if you're really deconstructing it and talking about things. Playing the whole song on the podcast? Probably not fair use. Now, let's bust up some other common fair use myths that trip up podcasters and others in this space. One common myth is this idea that, well, it's fair use if I credit the creator. Now, giving credit is usually a good idea, but it doesn't automatically make something a fair use. And in fact, it could be the smoking gun that gets used to prove that you knew or should have known that you needed to get permission from somebody. Another myth is that, well, if it's under 30 seconds, I'm good. Well, no, there's no magic number. Even a single second of a song could technically be a copyright infringement if it's the most recognizable part, the heart of the work. Another myth, I'm not making any money from my podcast, so it's okay, it's fair use. Well, the fact that it's not commercial use helps, but it isn't a guarantee. Really, it's more about whether you're depriving the owner of a chance to make money from a licensing fee or something like that, or just depriving them of the right to say yes or no to something, to control how their thing is used. Another myth, if I change it slightly, it's fair use. Well, no, that is not true. Just tweaking a clip or adding background music does not make it transformative. That is what we call a derivative work, and that is still copyright infringement unless you have permission. So now let's talk about the right way to use copyrighted content in your podcast. You really want to use a piece of work of some sort? The best thing you can do is get permission. Licensing it is always going to be the safest bet. And it'll cost you less in the long run to get permission or a license than it would be to fight over a fair use determination. You could also use royalty-free or Creative Commons content. Find material out there that's already available. Or create original content instead. Your voice, your music, your artwork is the star. And if you need music, there are lots of good libraries out there. I'm partial to Epidemic Sound, but there's also Artlist and Audio Jungle and a whole bunch of others. I would recommend any of them, and you can get really good, useful music clips. There won't be the pop song you want. It won't be the Rolling Stones or Britney Spears or Taylor Swift, but it'll be good stuff. So have a look at what's available on some of these libraries, and they're very affordable. Or you could go to the public domain. There are archives of old recordings. Just make sure that both the song, the underlying musical composition, and the recording that you're using are actually in the public domain. Copyright law basically expires 95 years after the work was first created, if the work was created prior to 1978. Everything created after that, it's tied to the death of the author, and it goes for 70 years after the author's death. So, now I know you want an answer to this question. Can you rely on fair use? And I wish I could give you one, but there really are no rules of thumb. In fact, the law specifically outlines that this defense requires an ad hoc determination to be made each time for each alleged infringement. So look, fair use can be tricky, but here's a couple things you need to remember. If your use is transformative and limited and not competitive with the original, then you're in better shape. I can't say it's a sure thing, but you're better shape. And there are no guarantees. So when in doubt, get permission or use substitute material from the public domain or that you've licensed or created yourself. And if you want to go even deeper into this, this is the kind of thing I cover inside my Easy Legal for Podcasters program. And you can grab my free secret video lesson right now over at gordonfiremark.com/levelup. It's titled Level Up Your Podcasting Success. So that's it for today's episode of Legit Podcast Pro. If you found this helpful, I hope you'll hit subscribe, leave a review, share this with a fellow podcaster, anybody you think might find interest here. And don't forget, check out that exclusive video lesson on leveling up your podcast success, gordonfiremark.com/levelup. And until next time, keep on podcasting like a pro, keep on making great content, and stay on the right side of the law so you can keep doing it. Hope it can help you achieve the kind of impact and influence and income that you know you deserve. I'll see you next time here on Legit Podcast Pro.